wanted to make sure I can do the live today. I've been bouncing around a couple topics in my head on, what we can talk about. But we're doing good out here. Hope everybody is doing okay wherever they are. So I really did want to come on today and talk about the calendar. I kind of wanted to talk about it yesterday, but I figured that I would wait a day and kind of deliberate in my head on, what I was going to say. And, what is going to end up happening is this is going to just turn into a flat earth talk because, again, this is one of my favorite subjects in Bible study. This is literally Bible science, right? So the science I know of, you know, in the modern age with experimentation and observation, the scientific method, all that is great. It works. It definitely a great method to investigate the things that are in front of you, right? It's a good method to theorize on the way that things could be, right? But you cannot do it, of course, with heaven. You cannot, go beyond the prescribed understanding, if you know what I'm trying to say here. So the calendar has to do with that because the sky is a clock. The sky is the calendar. Does that make sense? And the sky being the calendar is probably the greatest piece of architecture man, mankind has ever seen. Do you see what I'm saying? Architecture is, of course, the entire earth, because the earth is built and formed and shaped. But it's sporadically, right? It's not done in a particular set or pattern uh, in order for us to see anything or do anything. All right, I'm still, doing some things here. So I'm sorry, I'm looking at an email there. So um, so where was that? Oh, we were talking about the calendar. Okay, so the Earth is shaped sporadically out, right? We know it's flat, but there's trees here, there's trees there, there's mountains here, there's oceans there. It's not really done in any sort of way to navigate or guide you, right? Of course, you have topographical ways that you can, locate yourself on the map, but it's not necessarily for that. The stars are, right? That's the difference. The stars are. And not only are they made for you to navigate yourself and to be able to know, based off of where they are, they're also they're also put together in a way where you can predict the future, right? Because you can know, where a particular star will be in the sky in that time of year. So anytime you look up, you should be able to look at a certain star pattern and know what season you're in, wherever you are on the earth, right? And so the structure, the architecture of the heavens is a technological marvel. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a calendar. It shows you where you are in time by what position the stars are in. It's in its own language. So you have to be able to read the language. Now, this is the interpretation of the tool that we're using, the firmament with the stars in it. It's what it's there for. It's what it's always been there for in every ancient generation or in every ancient culture. We know the pyramids in Egypt are aligned to the stars. Why? Not because they're expecting some alien to come down and inhabit the temple, right? And then not saying that that's not also what's going on. We know that aliens are just fallen angels, demonic entities, right? But we do know that they are used to create with these particular stars in the sky. So they're part of the Egyptian calendrical system too. They're made to specifically point at a time of year. Do you see what I'm saying? They're a part of the calendar system, the worshiping system. And so, what what we see then, what we see in the sky, is this technological marvel that allows us to see into the future, and that's not a light thing either. What all calendars are made to do is to allow you to see into the future, right? If you've got a 2024 calendar and you're planning to go on a cruise in, you know, November, you would look in your calendar and say, okay, on November such and such, November 10th, um, we'll schedule this cruise, and we'll, just make sure that we keep the date and get everything ready, and then we'll be ready to go, on that, in that future date, right? That's a calendar. That's literally telling you November, which is the month, 10th, which is the day of the month, and then the year 2024, right? So the ancient people didn't necessarily need to write that down because the they had the sky, right? Um, in Proverbs, um, and now I cannot remember the entire quote. But it's in Proverbs, and it's about the woman who was luring men into her bedchamber, whose husband had went out and wouldn't be back until such and such time. I think it was the next new moon, right? So meet me in such and such place. And so, do you see what I mean here? The way that it's used, and I know I'm bringing that verse because I can't remember exactly um, the um, the situation that they were in to use the moon to deduce the time. But it was either she was being up with this guy in this full moon, or her husband wasn't returning until that full moon. And you guys correct me and tell me which one it is. It's in Proverbs, I believe it's Proverbs 6 or 7, somewhere around there. So yeah, yeah. Let's see what's going on outside the gate. But yeah, so it's around there. You guys know the scripture that I'm talking about. So he was supposed to, or she was supposed to meet at that particular time, right? And that's a particular time. So you can look up at the moon and say, okay, well, meet me, at even on half moon. Then you know right around what time that is. You see what I'm saying? You know when to meet that person. You can look up at the sky and say, it's the half moon. He's supposed to be around here somewhere. Where is he at? Right? And so it's a calendar. It's a system that is used in the heavens to be able to tell time. It's a timepiece, right? It's a cosmic timepiece. And what Abraham deduced, and this is him, investigating the world around him. We know that from, I think it's Jasher tells this story. We know from Jasher that Abraham, Jasher and Josephus, we know that Abraham looked up at the heavens and saw that the heavens aligned at specific times for his bit, right? That means if they're doing that, that they were being controlled by something else that told them to behave in a way for humans' benefit. He knows that humans weren't able to go up there and configure the stars, right? He knew that. Abraham knew that. So since they were behaving in such a way for us to benefit, then the person who made them for us. Do you see what I'm saying? That he made them for us to benefit. And Abraham, seeing people worshiping the stars and the moon and the sun, and Abraham looks up and says, "Why are y'all doing that? They're actually serving us." They're actually serving us. They're doing these things commanded by someone else for our benefit, right? So this is the situation that we have before us. You have a technological timepiece, architectural wonder, right? People say, "Where is the proof of God?" Right? Where is proof? He's if I was God, I would have left a big marker in the center of the world that was an arrow pointing up, and put my name on it, just to let people know that I'm here. Well, you don't have to do that. You've got a giant configured machine that's directly above your head, only you've been fooled into thinking that it's something else, right? You've got the most futuristic. Do you see what I'm saying? You've got the most technologically advanced structure in history, right? Right above your head. And you've had it for your entire life. Humans have had it for so long that they take it for granted. You don't recognize that the clock on your wrist tells time, and it's far less uh, complicated than the one in the sky. Right? You don't have two light sources in the sky that are the same size that overlap each other at certain times of the time span, not of the year, but of the time span and eclipses. You don't have that happen, and it's a random occurrence, right? This is you're talking about like a hole in one, a cosmic hole in one, if you believe in the situation that they tell you exists. Do you see what I'm saying? So what you literally have is a not just a calendar, not just a clock, but a giant structure, a giant mechanism. It is designed for you to look at and know where you are in history and tell the future too. Says the in Psalms 19 that uh, uh, their story goes until the end of time, right? It says that their words go into the end of time. What words, right? What words are the stars speaking? Do you see what I'm saying? And so this is the importance of knowing that there is a calendar in the heavens. This is what the calendar is all about, is recognizing that you can just look up and there's a timepiece there to direct you and guide you, right? And you can see how that's the case by the lies that they tell about it, right? So they've fooled everybody into believing that there's billions of light years of nothing, right? This just expansive area of nothing and space and time. Do you see what I'm saying? So when you're looking it's like taking the clock face and stretching it out as far as you possibly can. Like taking the clock that we know of and stretching and slowing it down infinitely. Do you see what I mean? Making it to where that its function as a clock is useless. I mean, of course, it's for the day and the night, but besides that, its function as a clock being useless because now you see it not as time keeping for yourself, you see it as time itself, right? Because what they say is that if you look out at a star and the star is real, and they estimate the star is 800 light years away, then you're looking at the star from 800 light years ago, right? And so the concept is that you're looking at it in the past as it was 800 light years ago. And so that's time. That's a stretched out form of what it actually is, which is a timekeeping piece. Do you see what I'm saying? In this, you know, alternate, impossible structure that they've given us for the concept of the universe, then it sucks time in instead of delivering time to you. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like the opposite approach, but philosophical way. Like, okay, that star is so far away that you can only speak on it in philosophical terms. So you cannot be trying to use it as a timepiece. So this is what's amazing about understanding the Bible, understanding the text, because you find out that the science in it is real science. It's, the function of the world is science. Understanding the function of the world is what science is. And if you do it with this crazy philosophy in mind, then you have only just the base of what you need, only the physicality of what you need. If you investigate the things unseen, right, then you have the more fuller and clearer picture. And so let's talk about Shalom, Mishpachah. I see we got one person on here. And so let's talk about, we're talking about the calendar. And the calendar, what it is literally the sky. So the firmament, the stars and the sun and the moon are the calendar. And so we've been blessed with this technological marvel in the sky called the firmament, which tells time for us. We don't even have to have a watch, because we have the sun, which tells us by its position in the sky really what time it is, right? If you say meet me at noon, you can tell by where the sun is when it's noon. You can tell when you're late, when you're early, all that, right? So we've been given a calendar in the sky. And so let's talk about it. Let's talk about how we use it, how the Bible uses it. Because there's a lot of confusion there, and, people are wondering. And here's the thing. We can't know for absolute sure all the uses, because the practice of analyzing the sky for the time that's in it has been so far out of practice for our people that, it's, weird science to us. And so we are looking from the outside in. And when we do that, we see through a glass darkly, and we don't always understand everything that we're looking at. So it's understood that we would be, we would misunderstand some of the things that we're now. But in an effort to reinterpret, we just use all the information at our disposal to be able to figure some of these things out. And so this is what we've come up with, right? Everybody has different cylindrical systems out there, and there's many different interpretations on how to, how Yah's calendar falls, right? Um, but as we've discussed, the most important part is understanding that it's in the sky. And so some people will use different systems, like people use the Enoch calendar. People use the lunar calendar. People use a solar calendar. People use a solar lunar calendar. And so all of these different styles of calendar, have their biblical strong points, right? Because they all hold a part of the truth. But all of them always focus on one aspect and kind of leave other aspects out. So so really you're left partial clock if you're only using particular aspects, instead of others. And so let's just kind of flesh this out a little more. Shalom, shalom. We've got one more person on. Shabbat shalom for, I guess, maybe the sun is down in the United States in some places. Maybe not. I think it's probably still early. It's 5 o'clock. Probably not. But the sun is down here. So we don't necessarily keep Shabbat from the night before. We keep it starting in the morning when the sun comes up. But there are a lot of people who do keep it this way. So if you do and you're on the Africa side, Shabbat shalom to you guys. So we're just still here talking about the calendar and how Yah has set up his, sun, moon, and stars to portray his calendar. So where we find how to use the calendar is in the feast days, because this is, it tells you in the feast day system what aspects of the calendar you're using and when. And so really easy to determine, how the calendar is used by looking at the feast cycle. So we go to Leviticus 23. Um, and we know that the first feast day that it talks about is the Sabbath, right? And so here's a really, really cool thing that the Father has for us in place, another counting system, right? A counting system that relies on sevens, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days that you work, and in the seventh day you rest, and then you repeat that cycle. There, right at creation, he's establishing the first timekeeping piece, and this one is this one has no need for really a sun or a moon, right? Because it depends on, and now we can, we can kind of analyze, we can unpack that statement because that's saying, hey, don't you see that the sun rises and sets, and doesn't that, uh, form a day? And how else would you understand when the Sabbath was if that's not what a day was? So let's unpack it. So in the beginning, you got day one, day two, day three, day four. You have the light, the firmament, the stars, the dry land, all of these different things created. And then he rests on the seventh day. Oh, well, before we get there, we have on the fourth day the sun and the moon and the stars being created. So here you have your calendar being put into the firmament on day four, right? And so here's the mystery, was denoting a day before then. So how can it be evening and morning on day one if there wasn't a sun that's circling the earth for it to be a day one? Do you see what I'm saying? Because the scripture clearly says, and it was evening and then morning, day one. So what's happening there? Do you guys know? Because it's a wild thing. What's happening is that the whole earth at that time is lit by the face of Yah, by the literal shining. You remember when Moses went up, and then we're also talking about Yahusha because he's the creative aspect here. But the full glory of Yahweh is resting on Yahusha as he's creating the earth, right? And so that glory passes from glory to glory, passes on to even, passed on to Moses, right? And so his face is what is creating the even and the morning, those beginning days. Does that make sense? And guess what? At the end of the world, it's going to be the same way. If you look at Revelation, and then it's in another place too. Is it in Zechariah? Where it says, yes, in Zechariah, where it says there will be a day that is unlike any other day, where it'll be even all day, and the light won't be the regular light, it'll be a light of pureness. I think it's in Zechariah 13, but you guys look that up. So at the end of the world, when there will be no use of the sun and there will be no need for the moon, the earth, the heavens are going to be wiped away and redone. New Jerusalem is going to come out of the sky, and Elohim is going to exist on earth. And if Elohim exists on earth, guess what? His face is shining so brightly that there is no need for sun. Do you see what I'm saying? So the whole style of environment changes in that final era, right? In the time without calendar, the time that's forever. Does that make sense to you guys? So here and now, we have this calendar system, but before here and now, there was the face of Yah that lit the world. And so this is how we know that on the fourth day that changed, and he set in place the sun and moon system. And this is how we also know that the Sabbath day is counted and not understood with the sun and the moon. Does that make sense? Because before there was a sun and moon to count the days according to which day was which, there was the face of Yah. So that means it can't be according to the sun or the moon for Sabbath. The only reason that the sun would be involved is to know when it goes up and know when it goes down and when to count, right? Otherwise, you're not looking at the moon for your Sabbath. And I know some people keep lunar Sabbath, but this is the error in that style of thinking because, of course, the moon wasn't created when the count started. Of course, the moon jumps 28 to 29, so it's not going to be a 7-day cycle. Does that make sense? You just have to count with this one. This is one style of the calendar of Elohim. That's the count. 7 days, repeat. 7 days, repeat. 7 days, repeat. It is the arm on the clock of Elohim. It's an arm. There's 3 more. So the next arm that we'll talk about is the one that, you know, we rely upon partially for the Sabbath day, right? The one that tells you when day starts and when the day ends. We completely depend on it, right? But there will come a time when we don't, right? There was a time when we didn't for a day. So I guess we wouldn't have experienced that because we'd be on day 6, right? So all that we've ever experienced in humankind has been with a sun and a moon. So we wouldn't have known that world before when there was no sun and moon. But anyway, so we come to the sun. The sun is a secondary timekeeping piece on top of the count, right? So this is why um, in the um, in the scripture it has the concept of the long count, the long 364-day count. That's a counting system, the sun on its own. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, do you use the sun and this counting system to determine your feast days? The answer is yes and no, because you're not doing it with the long count, you're doing it with a combined count. And so that combined count relies on another timekeeping piece, the third piece that we're going to talk about, the moon, right? The scripture literally says, right, on the first month, on the 10th day of the month, you are to pick your lamb for Passover. So on the month, and on the 14th day of the month, you are to slaughter the Passover between the evens. And we can talk about that, but that's a confusing concept too. So we can take a look at that. But in another video. So between the is understood like as the even is, like the understanding, because between is being, I believe. It's the same word for understanding. And so it's really in the midst of the even, if that makes sense to you. Um, so even at the even when the sun goes down, right? On that day, you keep you slaughter the Passover. And then on the 15th day, right? Then you start your feast of unleavened bread, right? The 15th day of the month, it says. But the thing is, guys, that word is not month. And you guys that are students of Hebrew will know this. That word is not month. It's Hodesh, right? From the word Hadash. That's Het, Dalet, Shin. And that word does not mean month, right? They've got it done. That word does not mean month. That word means new, right? Or renew. Like the Barit Hadashah is a New Testament, right? The New Testament, the Gospels and the Epistles. So in Hebrew, it's called the Barit Hadashah. And it's known as the Barit Hadashah. That Hadashah part is new, and Barit means covenant. So new covenant, New Testament. And so that same word, Hadash, is used for the word month in Leviticus 23. in the first month, in the first Chodesh. If you guys understand Hebrew grammar, you can put a wa or a yod in specific places in a word, and it just very slightly changes the meaning of the word within the category of its original meaning, right? So if you have shalom, we know that means to be whole. And if you have shalom, that means wholeness or peace, right? So if you have a word like Hodesh, it means new, right? It means a form of something that's new or renewed. It actually would be closer to renewed, right? And the way I always explain this, yeah, and I guess I can get to that here in a minute, but let's slow down. Let's go one step at a time. So that word Hodesh doesn't mean month, it means moon. Does that make sense? So the word month is not a word that's used in the text. There's no real word for month. The word month is an English word, Month, right? And so that literally means, it's literally a shortened word for moon. So we have the Gregorian calendar. This is the modern calendrical system that we use. We don't use the sky anymore because, just really point blank, we're not smart enough to use the sky anymore. You have to study to know how to tell time with the sky. We have the dumbed down photocopy version of a real calendar. And in that calendar is the Gregorian. You have different components of it, right? You have the 7-day count, Monday through or Sunday through Saturday. That's the 7-day count. That's one whole calendrical system. The same one from Leviticus 23:1, right? Or not one, the one where it goes into the Sabbath, right? I don't think that's one. Uh, and so that's the same system. It's the same exact system from the Bible, right? And so the second part of the Gregorian calendar is the 364 days, right? Or is it 364 and a quarter? 365, I'm sorry, 365 and a quarter. So that is the sun's aspect of the Gregorian calendar. This is its interpretation of the sun, right? Because the calendar contains 365 days. And so the next component, we're just going in the order that we talked about, the Sabbath, the sun, and then the moon, right? And so if we look at the Gregorian calendar, we've identified the Sabbath in the Gregorian calendar, the Sabbath count. We've identified the sun because there's 365 days and a leap day, right? And so these are the two components that the calendar we have in the sky has. So we're looking for the moon, and we find it in the month, right? January through December are false moons. Does that make sense? They're false moons set up with so a moon has 28 days in its cycle for it to go from new moon to new moon, right? 28 days. And so it's not the same every month either. It actually switches from 28 to 29. So it runs its own kind of schedule, and it's very specific, right? And so it's the secondary timekeeping piece that actually tells its own time too. A perfect timekeeping piece, right? You look up at the sky, and the moon is going to be half, it's going to be quarter, it's going to be like the slit, it's going to be waxing, it's going to be waning, it's going to be moving every time you see it. The way that it looks is going to be different every night. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's doing a lot of timekeeping. And so what it tells us is it gives us the specific count. Do you know a stopwatch, when you have the minute seconds? This is what a dancing piece of luminary does for a sky. It gives you that split second. The sun doesn't do that for us. The sun is going to come around and it's going to come around and it's going to come around. But depending upon what the moon is doing, gives us the independent marker in that day to identify and distinguish that day from any other day in that moon. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is what Leviticus 23 is talking about when it goes into the keeping of the feast days. In the first new moon of the year, in the 14th day of that new moon, at the evening, you'll slaughter your Passover. Do you see how you have a conjunction of all three methods right there? Well, you don't have the Sabbath just yet, but we're going to incorporate the Sabbath here too, because the feast cycle absolutely embraces the Sabbath into it as a timekeeping piece, just to show you that it all works together, right? So what you do have, though, is the first moon of the new year. That means you're waiting on that new year to come around. The Book of Enoch tells us that the new year comes around at the time of the equinox, when you have equal day and equal night. When you go over to that next day, the Book of Enoch tells us that then your year starts, right? The sun has told you when the year starts. But that's not what the text tells us. That's not when the text tells us to start our feast cycle. It literally says, start the feast cycle in the first new of the year. So you're looking at the sun to see when the year comes in, and then you look at the new after that year comes in. Does that make sense to you guys? You're looking and saying, okay, the sun is not in its center position. It's a day beyond. We're in the new year. Now, what's the moon doing? Oh, we've got the quarter from the last moon of last year still in effect. Do you understand that there's the last moon of the year? Do you understand that the moon, the sun, don't start on the same day? If they did, it'd be the identical hands on a clock moving at the same speed and at the same time and wouldn't be good for timekeeping. They go on their own speeds because it adds a dimension of exactness to your timepiece, right? If you have on the you that's why you have on your watch a second hand, a minute hand, and an hour hand. They all move different speeds because it shows you exact time, right? That's why the moon had 354 days and the sun has 364. The moon is moving faster. The moon is your minute hand. The sun is your hour hand, right? This is your calendar. It's not just your clock, it's your calendar, right? And so we look at it and we see it as this technological marvel that's doing all of these wild things in the sky. But not only that, it's doing those things against the backdrop of the stars, each themselves being a coordinated piece that is moving at a similar speed around the clock face. So you can also see the long count. Josephus talks about a 600-year long count that the ancient peoples like Noah and Enoch didn't make it that long, you know, Yered and Mahalalel and all of these ancient Methuselah, all of these ancient figures, Methuselah, I said Methuselah, Methuselah. So all of these ancient figures lived long enough to have counted that long count, lived beyond that 600 years it takes to see a long count. And that's why we have these long counts. Do you see what I'm saying? That's why we know when the comet's going to come around, the one that comes around every 200 years. That's why we know, because the ancients lived that long, be able to track it and see when it's coming. Do you see what I'm saying? And so we look at the we look at the timepiece that we have in the sky, and we see it if we're looking at a solar system style of interpretation. What's up, boys? Oh, sons. All right, I'm coming. Finish anyway. All right, y'all. So I guess I'm gonna go and get on off of here. Um, I wanted to go deeper into the concept, but maybe I can come back tomorrow and talk about the same thing. I see it's one person still on here. If anybody has any questions about the calendar or, how we come to some of the conclusions, what I really wanted to go into is what I'm missing is the Sabbath, because we get into the Sabbath as a part of the calendrical system in Shabbatot, the counting from the waving of the sheep, 7 Sabbaths, and then the next day, that incorporates itself into to the calendrical system, showing that Sabbath is a piece of timekeeping just as much as the sun and the moon and the stars are as well. And so I guess I'll get into that tomorrow. Um, Shalom, shalom, you guys. Looks like everybody's going off of here. So shalom, shalom, y'all. I'll catch you guys next time.